Welcome everyone, I'm Dale and this is Cinema Historia. A womanizing pilot, an Air Force ex-girlfriend, and an R.A.F. bomber squadron. This week we're going back to 1941 for a wartime romance film called A Yank in the R.A.F. starring Tyrone Power and Betty Grable. And this is directed by Henry King. So where does our story begin this week? Well, it begins in 1940. So in 1940, American-built North American Harvard training aircraft are flown to the Canadian border, where they are towed across the frontier for use in Britain. Cocky American pilot Tim Baker, played by Tyrone Power, decides to fly across the border to Trenton, Ontario, and winds up in trouble with the authorities. He claimed he was looking for Trenton, New Jersey. Accepting another flight while in Trenton, he ferries a Lockheed Hudson bomber to Britain, pocketing $1,000 for his work. In London, he runs into his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Carol Brown, played by Betty Grable, who works in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force by day and stars in a nightclub by night. Not too pleased in seeing him, calling him a worm for his womanizing ways, lying, and long absence. But he is confident she still has strong feelings for him. In the meantime, he decides to enlist in the R.A.F. or Royal Air Force, and Carol Brown attracts the attention of two R.A.F. officers, Wing Commander John Morley and Flying Officer Roger Pilby. Morley persists in seeing Brown despite there being another man, and Pilby is unable to persuade either Baker or Morley to introduce him. After completing training, Baker is assigned to Morley's bomber squadron rather than one equipped with fighters. After their first mission of bombing Berlin with propaganda leaflets, the disgruntled crew returns to base. When Baker is late for their date, Brown accepts Morley's invitation to spend a weekend at his country estate. There, Morley asks her to marry him. When Baker finds out about this, he offers to marry her himself. Feeling insulted, she tells him that they are through. Back to base, the two rivals learn that the Germans have invaded the Netherlands and an urgent bombing mission is needed. So, does Carol Brown marry Morley? Does Tim Baker remain a worm? Or does a dangerous mission change our story? This film was 20th Century Fox's second most successful film in 1941. A 1942 nominee Oscar for Best Effects and Special Effects. Also a Photoplay Award winner in 1941 for Best Performances by Tyrone Power and Betty Grable. Studio head Darryl F. Zanuck recruited big star power to guarantee success at the box office with Tyrone Power and Betty Grable, who was a famous pinup girl at the time. The U.S. was neutral when this film was produced, and Zanuck supported American entry into the war to support the Allies. In fact, this movie was made prior to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Its world premiere on September 26, 1941 was about 2.5 months prior to the Pearl Harbor attack. And the trivia question this week: did a flying stunt double in this film run into serious trouble? Did a flying stunt double in this film run into serious trouble? So, a little more history and the answer to our trivia question coming up next. Now, since some of the fighting sequences in our film involve Spitfire warplanes, I thought it might be interesting to talk about the history of the Spitfire. And some of the photos you're about to see, I found a Spitfire at the Royal Air Force Memorial Museum in Trenton, Ontario. So the Spitfire, also called Supermarine Spitfire, was the most widely produced and strategically important British single-seat fighter of World War II. The Spitfire was designed by Reginald Mitchell of Supermarine Limited in response to a 1934 Air Ministry specification calling for a high-performance fighter with an armament of 8 wing-mounted machine guns. It was designed around a 1,000 horsepower 12-cylinder liquid-cooled Rolls-Royce PV-12 engine, giving it speeds up to 586 kilometers an hour. Faster than its formidable German opponent, the Bf-109, at altitudes above 15,000 feet and just as maneuverable, the Spitfires were sent by preference to engage German fighters. First flown in 1936, it was the only British warplane to be in production from the war's beginning to its end. Through its production, which began in 1938 and ended in 1947, the Spitfire went through 24 different versions to suit specific duties to take advantage of ongoing performance enhancements to the Rolls-Royce, Merlin, and later Griffon engines. The Spitfire was not produced in Canada, but that did not stop the RCAF from using it. There were 14 Spitfire squadrons in the RCAF, and many more Canadians flew the Spitfire as members of the R.A.F. 403 Squadron was the first RCAF unit to fly Spitfires on Canadian operations. Despite the large number of aircraft flown operationally by Canadians, only a few actually belonged to the RCAF. The first Spitfire in Canada was used in 1940 to test the first G-suit, which was invented in Canada. Even after the war, the RCAF kept the Spitfire in service until 1950. And the scenes in this film with the Spitfires were filmed in the UK. The Spitfires were from the 602 Squadron under the command of Squadron Leader Sandy Johnson. The unit was resting in early 1941 in Scotland after fighting in the Battle of Britain. Interesting. And the answer to our trivia question this week: did a flying stunt double in this film run into serious trouble? Yes, big time. Tyrone Power's flying stunt double, R.A.F. pilot Lieutenant Harold Barlow, was shot down by German aircraft and taken prisoner. This is according to a 20th Century Fox press release on January 24th, 1942. I'd like to give out a big thanks to the people at the Royal Air Force Memorial Museum in Trenton, Ontario, for allowing me to take some photos. They're very helpful. Highly recommend going there. If you enjoy my videos, could you help keep my channel in flight and subscribe? And if you're an existing or new subscriber, a big thank you. I gotta go. I'm getting hitched. And she's real excited about it too. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope to see you back next week.
Come back here! And take this thing with you!
Don't cry, darling. Don't worry about me. I'll be back. Nothing ever happens to me.
You would get the wrong size.